Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /MaliciousCompliance, where people get exactly what they ask for. And in today's episode, OP's teacher gets taught a lesson she won't forget after she tries to get OP in trouble for ignoring her when in fact OP can't hear her. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's super satisfying stories. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and as always, you can send your stories to this email right here. Let's dive in. So when I was in college, I used to work for my local movie theater. Now, the job was amazing most of the time. You had a lot of freedom from the managers if you did your job right. So on a busy night, this was the situation. I was working behind the bar, and we had a system where we would sell tickets and concessions at the same registers. Most of the time, this would work just fine. But on a busy Saturday night, it would take a lot of time to take the ticket orders, discuss the seating in the theater, and get all the food and drinks. On this evening though, everything was running smoothly. It was a busy night, but the team was well prepared and we had everything under control. I was taking an order from a longtime customer. Let's call her Linda. Linda was a nice woman, and we always had a nice chat with her. She was 25 years old, and she had a subscription at our theater. This would mean it would show her picture on the app with her date of birth and a QR code. This way, we could see that the person was old enough to see the movie. Linda was ordering some nachos and 2 beers. Now, I know that Linda is well above the legal drinking age, which in my country is 18, and I'd scanned her QR code. I knew her age was alright, so there was no reason to ask for any form of ID. So I'm here getting the order ready, and when I say the total to Linda, a lady behind her, let's call her Karen for obvious reasons, starts yelling. Karen says, "Hey, you didn't check her ID." Linda looks over her shoulder, probably wondering why this woman is meddling, and turns back to me and says, "Do you really need to see my ID? I could grab it if you want to." So I'm here thinking, Karen should just shut up and mind her own business. I say to Linda, "No, there's no need to. I know you're older than 18, and it says so on the app." Karen screams and says, "No, you need to check it. You need to check everyone that buys alcohol." I tell her, "Miss, I've already verified her age," and that's when Karen interrupts me and says, "No, only a legal ID or passport is good to verify age." Now sure, this is the case in a normal situation, but when a customer has a subscription at our theater, they have already verified their age and their name with a legal ID. So we accept the app as a legal form of verification. At this point, I'm already losing my patience. Like, why is Karen meddling in the situation when Linda's clearly over the age of 18? I say to her, "Miss, thank you for bringing this to my attention, but the woman's a loyal customer and we know her age because..." Karen says, "No, this is unacceptable. You should check her ID." I'm really starting to get annoyed, and Linda's noticing as well. Luckily, Linda's a chill woman. She smiles at me while grabbing her ID, and she says, "Here it is, all good, right?" I say to Linda, "Sorry for this, and thank you for showing. It's still not necessary though." Linda says to me, "Oh, that's no problem at all. Just good luck with her." She says that while smiling and giving me a wink. I finalize the purchase and get ready to enjoy serving Karen. Karen's got a major attitude, and the order takes ages. She doesn't like the seats, and she changes them a couple of times. She also demands a student discount, which we don't have on Saturdays, and she's clearly older. Finally, she orders her food, and last but not least, she orders a red wine. You can see where this is going. So I grab the wine and put it on the counter, and that's when Karen says, "Hey, you're gonna ask me for my ID, right? Because that's the right thing to do. That's how you do your job properly." So I say to Karen, "Can I see your ID, miss?" Karen says, "Ha, you may. Unlike that girl you served earlier who didn't show hers." Now sure, Karen wasn't looking anywhere near 18. Her date of birth indicated that she was in her 30s, but what I saw next put a smile on my face. Now sure, Karen was over the legal drinking age, but her ID was 2 months expired. And where I live, you're not supposed to serve alcohol to anyone with an expired ID card. I say to Karen, "Okay, so it looks like you're over the legal drinking age, but I'm so sorry to tell you that your ID's expired though, so I legally can't serve you alcohol." At that, Karen looks at her ID, and what do you know? Her face turns pale as she realizes that her ID is expired. And Karen says, "Well, I'm over 18, so I can drink. Just get me a wine." I say to Karen, "I'm sorry, but you told me to do my job properly. And by doing my job properly, I have to inform you that our establishment won't serve anyone with an expired ID. It's technically illegal." Now, Karen demands the manager, of course, and the manager of the evening was Bob, and Bob hated Karens, and I knew he would stand by my side. So I go grab Bob and inform him of the whole situation. When I explained it all, Bob just smiled at me with a huge grin on his face, and he says, "Let's go have some fun." So Bob walks out to me with the registers and Karen yells the whole story. And Bob listens very carefully. And then he reminds her of the rules and she needs to have some valid ID or she won't get her wine. Karen's of course done with the situation, I could clearly tell. She screams, "The ID states that I'm old enough." That's when Bob says, "I'm sorry miss, but this is no longer a legal form of ID. Your card is expired. And by law, we can't serve you." Karen at this point is bright red, and I thought she was gonna burst out in anger. She screams, "I demand you sell me this wine. This is ridiculous. I'm about to miss the movie." Bob tells her, "There's nothing I can do for you without valid ID, miss." Now at this point, I wish I could have taken a picture of Karen's face. The utter face of defeat was amazing to see. Karen just says, "Fine, keep the wine. I'm gonna go see the movie and I'm never coming back here." Bob tells her, "That's a shame, miss. Please enjoy the show." So after the whole incident, I got a compliment from Bob for sticking to the rules and for defeating a Karen in her own game. Guys, I would have paid money to see the look on her face when she realized she was beat. This is exactly why you don't tell people how to do their jobs, because it might come back to bite you. And to be fair guys, even I've forgotten to renew my license a few times before the expiry date. And honestly, I feel like that's something people do forget. Like the license is valid for a few years, just stays in your wallet, your purse, or whatever, and sometimes people just don't realize it. So please let me know if this has happened to you before. So in the early 90s, I worked for an international airline company in the IT department as desktop support. I was the first woman in IT for that company, and most companies in my country back then. The company was located at an international airport, and the company was housed in many buildings and airplane hangars spread across and around the airport. The buildings I serviced were mainly the hangars meant for airplane maintenance, and every 6 weeks, we would order all the IT equipment that was requested, stuff like specialized printers, computers, terminals, etc. My job was to take the equipment, set it up, and have the person responsible for said equipment to sign off on it. If it wasn't signed off for whatever reason, the equipment came back with me. It would be returned to the vendor and had to be reordered by the department. So with that said, being a woman in her early 20s, in a male-oriented profession, and dealing mostly with airplane maintenance men, I had to deal with a lot of stuff. From snickering men setting up computers I was supposed to service with porn screensavers, to men refusing to let me touch their computers and demanding I let a male colleague do it. Most of the time, I would just pretend to have not seen or heard what was going on. Until that one day, I just had enough of their BS. So this day, I had a trolley with me stacked with a bunch of printers and one laptop. Back then, only management got a laptop if one was delivered. It was kind of a big deal. Remember, I'm talking about the Windows 3.11 era. I walked in the airplane hangar with my stacked cart, setting up printers throughout, while a team of airplane maintenance dudes were servicing a cargo plane. Now, the minute I walked in, there was catcalling, whistling, and I heard someone say, "Hey baby, where are you going with all that heavy equipment?" As usual, I just ignored them and plowed on through so I could just get the F out of there. When I was done with the printers, I had to go find this manager who ordered the laptop and set it up for him. Airplane hangars are weird places. It seemed to be one giant space with some glass offices off the side. But it does have all these nooks and crannies that seem to be nothing, but they're actually small offices or storage spaces. It's hard to find the right place to be sometimes. So I walk up to a bunch of maintenance guys that are just about to take a break and ask them where I can find Mr. Manager Dude. When one of them goes, "Hey baby, are you done with all that heavy stuff? Because I'd like a black coffee with sugar. And my colleague here wants an espresso. And do us a favor, be quick please." To the other 5 or 6 guys, this was absolutely hilarious. And they start to tell me how they wanted their coffees. One of the guys actually brings out a tray and hands it to me, telling me to be quick about it. At this point, I'd had enough, and a thundercloud must have been forming around my head because Mr. Manager Guy, who just walks around the corner, snickers and goes, "Aw, what's up, sweetie? You got your period?" And of course, this was heartily laughed at by all the other guys. I then asked Mr. Manager Guy if he wanted a coffee too, and which kind. Now I can't remember what kind it was, but I took my cart with the laptop on it, drive it to the coffee machine, made all the coffees, and drive back over and hand everyone their coffee order. When I hand Mr. Manager Guy his coffee, he says, "Okay, honey, let's go show you my office so you can set up my new laptop." I then looked him in the eye, smiled, and told him I can't, as I'm late for my next appointment with all the coffee orders. I really have to run. Unfortunately, your laptop's gonna have to be returned and you're gonna have to reorder one, so I'll see you in 6 weeks. Bye. Of course, he tried to tell me that he really needed that laptop now, and the coffee thing was all good fun and I shouldn't be so sensitive, blah blah blah. When I just kept on walking with my cart, it turned ugly pretty fast. The guy starts yelling that I was a bitch and he was gonna have me fired. And did I have any idea who he was? I just silently chucked everything in the car and drove off with him screaming after me. Now, the guy did try to get me fired, but my manager had my back, and he made sure his reorder was delayed a few times to teach him a lesson. When I finally delivered his laptop 4 months later, he was very respectful though. Guys, I love this. Talk about teaching that manager a lesson, right? And I'm glad OP's boss had her back 100% and did what a good boss is supposed to do, which is take care of their employees. And I can only hope that OP approached him with a snide remark when she delivered the laptop for a second time saying, "Hey, do you want a laptop this time or do you want a coffee?" So this happened a couple of years ago when I was fresh at high school, in year 7. One important thing to note with me is that I'm profoundly deaf in both ears, and I can't hear a single thing without my cochlear implants. However, I can lip read pretty accurately, so I'm not completely lost without them. Another thing to note is that my cochlear implants run on batteries, and these need to be replaced every 2 days. This is important later on. Most of the teachers were understanding about this, and they would often go out of their way to make sure that I could clearly hear what they were saying, such as seating me towards the front of the class or standing directly in front of me when addressing the whole class. Except for one teacher who was a hard ass about it. She also happened to be a music teacher, and she'll be known as Miss L. Also, this is probably the worst combination because music is also my weakest subject, for obvious reasons. Enter the malicious compliance. On this day, me and my class are off to our music lesson, and this happens to be a double period, which means an hour and 30 minutes long. Anyways, we start the lesson, and pretty much 2 minutes after we sit down, the batteries in my cochlear implants had run flat. I need to change them. However, as my bag was in the room next door, I decide to raise my hand, like an obedient little boy, and ask if I can go grab my batteries. Now at this point, I could still lip read, and I could still understand what the teacher was saying, but I'd much rather be able to hear. Anyways, my teacher pretty much ignores the fact that my hand is up, and after a couple of minutes, I pretty much get the hint that she doesn't even want to answer my question. I'm thinking, whatever, I can still lip read and understand most of what she's saying. So basically, Miss L asked the whole class to go to the computers, listen to an audio file that she'd sent us, and use that as inspiration to create our own piece of music. She also wanted us to show it to the class at the end of the lesson. Now, because I didn't want to get in trouble, I raised my hand again to try to ask if I can get the batteries from my bag. But she ignores me again. So I'm like, whatever, I don't like music anyway, so no big deal. As a result, I pretty much sit in front of the computer screen doing nothing, as I can't hear the audio file or make any somewhat decent piece of music. Now remember, this is a double period, so it's a pretty long wait. After 5 minutes, I get bored, so I decide to talk to my friends, and basically let them in on the joke, and we're trying our hardest not to laugh too hard. Pretty soon, word gets around the class, and now they can't wait until the end of the lesson to see what Miss L is gonna do. So the end of the lesson rolls around, and when it's my turn to play my piece of music, I pretty much just sit in silence, and the whole class starts laughing, but try to stifle it at the same time. And this is how the conversation goes between me and her at that point. Miss L says, "Hey, can you not hear me? I asked you to play your piece of music." Ironic, I know, right? I'm just sitting in silence, and the laughter's getting louder. And Miss L says, "Are you even listening to me? Are you trying to disrespect me by not listening to anything I say?" I try to respond, but Miss L just keeps going on and says, "Just play your piece of music, it's not that hard." I'm still trying to stifle my laughter at this point, and I tell her I can't. Miss L cuts me off and says, "Is this how you treat your teachers? Get out of my class right now." So I get up and pretty much wait out there until the lesson is over. I think she's expecting an apology from me, which was never gonna happen. Because after a couple of minutes, she pops her head out the door and she barks at me saying, "You have absolutely no respect for your teachers. Meet me in the office at lunchtime." So I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. So at lunchtime, I meet at the principal's office, just like she said. Another important thing is I'm pretty friendly with the headmaster. She opens the door and the conversation is as follows. Miss L says, "So this guy is giving me an attitude during my lesson and wouldn't listen to me. I would give him a Friday after school detention, but I feel he deserves to get a Saturday detention as well." Headmaster turns to me and says, "What happened?" I say, "Well, my batteries for my cochlear implant died, and when I raised my hand to ask if I could get the replacement batteries from my bag, she proceeded to ignore me." Miss L looks like she just had an epiphany at this point. Headmaster asked her, "Well, are you sure about this? Because he hasn't had a prior record about being disobedient." Mrs. L is looking flabbergasted, and she says, yes, I'm absolutely sure he was disrespecting me. I then say, sir, you know that I'm deaf and I would never on purpose do that to a teacher, right? Headmaster says, well, I'm inclined to believe the student here, and if you have no proof otherwise, there's nothing to discuss. Miss L then goes extremely red as she realizes her mistake and she storms out of the office. The headmaster gives me a slight smile before ushering me out of the office as well. Ever since then, she's never ignored me when I had my hand up. So yeah, that definitely sounds like a bad teacher, guys. 1, for ignoring a student when they have their hand up twice, may I remind you. And 2, for not looking around the class or even walking around to make sure students were busy doing their work. Like, what the heck was that teacher doing for over an hour? And who knows, maybe she's one of those teachers that thinks, I know he's not doing the work, so I'll just let him struggle and then humiliate him later when he has to present his work. Because sadly, those teachers do exist, guys. I've had a few like that, and they're just terrible. So in 2019, I moved from an apartment complex in Celebration, Florida to a condo. As a result, when you move out of an apartment, you get one final bill, which includes your last month's prorated rent, deductions for damages, security deposit refunds, and the like, and we paid it. The next month, I get a call from my wife, who says we've got a follow-up bill in the mail from the apartment management company for 2 cents. So we're both in the tech field, so we laughed that this company's IT department didn't catch the case of spending 50 cents in postage to collect 2 cents in revenue, but it happens. My wife prints out a copy of the bill, and I grab 2 cents from my change jar. The department complex is on my daily drive, so I swing by the office, walk in, and tell the manager that I want to pay my last bill. I say, it's 2 cents, here's the bill, and I have 2 cents if you want it. The manager says, nope, we don't take cash. Now, there was nothing else after that, just an awkward pause. I say to her, I don't expect you to take cash. I expect both of us to have a laugh about how silly the computer systems are, and for you to write off the 2 cents because it would cost you way more to process that payment. She then says to me, I'm not gonna do all that. Again, awkward pause. I then say, so you want me to write you a check for 2 cents and mail it, and you're gonna process that check? The manager says, yep. Send us a check and we'll process it. She then walks back into her office to end their conversation, and I'm thinking, well, that was rude. So I go home and set up an automatic monthly bank payment to my apartment complex for 3 cents. And then, because I'm a programmer, I write some code to send a letter once per month saying, I'm so sorry, I've overpaid my bill, please send me a check for the overpayment. And I use an online service that sends postcards in ridiculous sizes, up to around 18-inch by 24-inch. Figuring that will be my escalation strategy. The 1st of next month, I get a call from the apartment company's regional manager. After introducing themselves, the next 2 minutes were the most sincere, oh god, we made a mistake, please don't do this, we'll never contact you again apology that anyone could have ever hoped for. I stopped the mail and never heard from them again. Did I spend several hours on a malicious compliance for 2 cents? Yeah. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Guys, the postcard thing was a genius. The overpayment of 1 cent was a genius. OP is a friggin' genius. Like, this has got to be one of the best malicious compliances ever. Way to stick it to the company. And guys, I'm not gonna lie, I'm totally remembering this and adding it to my arsenal for future use if something like this ever happens to me. I've worked as a waitress for a restaurant in my hometown for over 4 years, since I was only 14. And I've seen and dealt with not a lot of great customers, but this woman, this Karen, was definitely the top 5 worst. The woman would always order the same thing, a hot turkey sandwich and the gravy extra hot. The gravy's already hot, and there's no way to heat it up more without burning it or microwaving it, and if it goes in the microwave, the gravy gets runny and the sandwich gets soggy as a result. So usually, we just bring it to her as is. So one day, she comes in, and on this day, my new manager, who's the owner's daughter, is working in the kitchen with one of the other cooks. It's my turn to take the table, so I do, and she's rude and she orders what she always does. But I guess today, she wants her gravy extra hot. So after I turn around to put the order in the kitchen window, she gets up to follow behind the counter to the window. She nudges me away from it, and she yells to the cooks, "Hey, I'm the bitch from hell, and I want my gravy so hot that it burns my mouth." She then smiles and goes back to sit down. We are all taken aback. It is a family restaurant, and there's other customers in here. And I'm embarrassed being shoved to the side. So I go back to the kitchen to process what happened. My manager's not having this. She says, "Don't worry, I'm taking care of it." A few minutes later, she hands me an oven mitt to carry out the woman's plate. The gravy is practically steam at this point, and I'm sure my manager microwaved the gravy for probably 5 minutes or more. I serve it to the woman and say, "My manager made it just how you asked." The funny thing is, she's seated right next to the counter, so I get to watch all this go down. At first, she looks so smug. She takes the first bite and her face distorts, and that's when she spits it out, as she clearly burnt her mouth, and she causes quite a scene. I walk over and smile and politely say, "So how is everything?" in the fakest customer service voice that I can. She says quietly and red-faced, "I must be having an allergic reaction or something." After that, she just sat there quietly. They usually get a pie for dessert, but this time her boyfriend just pays and they leave and go. Now, I also feel that I should provide a little further detail about what happened afterward, for those who are wondering. This happened many years ago, so probably almost 4. I've seen the woman a handful of times since then. She's come back to the restaurant to eat a few times, still demanding but less aggressive. Now, I do feel bad she got hurt, but I also feel that A, she asked for it, and B, she probably shouldn't have shoved visibly hot steaming gravy into her mouth. I'm sure she made a fine recovery from the incident, and she never got lawyers involved. It's a small town, and the business never really suffered from it. I think she was probably too embarrassed to mention it, and she never ordered that sandwich again. Guys, you know what they say, justice is best served molten lava hot. And I don't know why the heck she would even ask for that, right? Like, I want gravy so hot that it burns my mouth. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I get mad when my food is a little bit too hot. Like, I'm already hungry, right? I don't want to have to wait for food to cool down before eating. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious_compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy, crazy stories. And if you missed yesterday's episode on the channel, I'll link it right here. A super entitled Karen demands OP's house for free because she's pregnant. It's such a crazy story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.